Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a struggle that I think affects pretty much all of us in the modern world, the absolute burden of having too many choices, and what that says about who we are.
All right, think about this for a second. Whether you're trying to pick a movie on a streaming service, a brand of milk at the store, or even, a life partner, we are swimming in a sea of endless possibilities. But here's the real question. Does having more choice actually make us any happier? Turns out, the answer is way more complicated than you might think.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at a really surprising paradox. Then, we're going to define two totally different ways people make decisions. After that, we'll dive into the psychological cost of always needing the absolute best. And finally, we'll wrap up with some real practical ways to make choices you can actually feel good about.
All right, let's get right into it. Section 1. We're taught to believe that freedom of choice is everything, right? It's like a core value. But what if that's not the whole story? What if more isn't always better? Well, a psychologist named Barry Schwartz came up with this powerful idea he calls the paradox of choice. He discovered that this explosion of options we have has weirdly become a huge problem. Instead of feeling free, a lot of the time we just end up feeling completely burdened by it all. And there's this classic study that just perfectly shows what he means. And it's all about jam. Yeah, jam. Researchers set up a simple experiment in a grocery store that ended up revealing something pretty profound about how our brains work. And get this, the results are kind of mind-blowing. Sure, more people stopped to check out the huge display with 24 jams, but the people who saw the smaller display of just 6 jams, they were 10 times more likely to actually buy a jar. It's wild. All those extra options led straight to what we call decision paralysis.
Okay, so if we all get kind of frozen by too many choices, how do we deal with it? Well, it turns out most of us fall into one of two camps when it comes to making a call. First up, you've got your maximizers. These are the folks who believe that a perfect, optimal choice exists for every situation, and they will not rest until they've found it. For them, good enough is basically a failure.
And then, on the flip side, you have the Satisficers. Now, they're not looking for perfect. They're looking for good enough. They have their standards, for sure, but as soon as they find something that checks all their boxes, boom, decision made. The search is over.
So let's put them head to head. You can really see the difference. The maximizer goes on this epic, exhausting quest for the best. And here's the key part. They're constantly worried they miss something better, always comparing their choice to what others have. But the Satisficer, they're way more decisive and, believe it or not, usually a lot happier with what they end up with.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. You'd think the maximizer, after all that research, would be happier with their better choice, right? Maybe they found a flight that was $10 cheaper. But paradoxically, they often feel worse about those supposedly superior decisions.
This quote from Schwartz just nails it. Doing better, but feeling worse. It perfectly sums up the maximizer's curse. So why? Why does this happen? Well, the answer comes down to one really heavy emotion: regret. For a maximizer, the ghost of what if is always hanging around. So what's behind all this regret? Well, it's a few things. First off, there's this massive opportunity cost. When you look at 100 different options, picking just one feels like you're actively rejecting the other 99. Then their expectations just get sky high, impossibly high. And finally, they're always looking over their shoulder, wondering if their friend got a better deal or made a smarter choice. It's just a perfect recipe for feeling bad. Okay, so if any of this is sounding a little too familiar, and hey, no judgment here, what can you actually do about it? Let's talk about some strategies you can use to get some of your peace of mind back. It really boils down to being strategic with your brain power. First, and this is a big one, you've got to choose when to choose. Don't waste an hour researching the best brand of toothpaste. Save that energy for the big stuff. Second, actively try to settle for good enough. Define what you need, and the first thing that fits the bill, go for it. Third, try to make your choices permanent. Committing helps shut the door on regret. And finally, practice being grateful for the choice you made instead of dwelling on what you might be missing out on. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's not that choice is bad, of course not, but learning how to manage it. That's the real secret. It's about making sure your choices serve you instead of leaving you stressed out and paralyzed. And that wraps up our explainer. So I'll leave you with this one question to chew on. When you're honest with yourself, which one are you, a maximizer or a satisficer? And how is that shaping your life and your own happiness?